All right, in this lecture, we're going to continue discussing one of the reasons why we are all here, and that is photosynthesis. So we're going to start in photosynthesis with a discussion, and what this lecture is going to be mostly about is the light-dependent reactions. So for some context, I'm going to show you a picture that you've already seen before. This is an Alodia leaf very up close, and you guys all saw this. You could see the cell walls in there. You can see these chloroplasts floating around. These chloroplasts are what we're going to be looking at mainly. So let's zoom in on one and just get a sense for some of the chloroplast's anatomy. So this is a thylakoid here. One of these green discs is referred to as a thylakoid. Okay, and when you stack these things together, you get a granum. Okay, so these this thing that looks like a stack of pancakes. That is called a granum, but more importantly, each of these discs is called a thylakoid. So several thylakoids make up a granum. Within a chloroplast, there are many thylakoids, there are many granum. And so, rather importantly, the thylakoid is where the light-dependent reactions take place. So your thylakoids are what are actually going to be having sunlight come and hit them, and they're going to be generating energy. And that plant is going to use that energy and converting it into sugar. So hopefully you remember from week 1, the first law of thermodynamics, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And so when sunlight hits these leaves, some of it's converted into heat, some of it is reflected, and some of it is converted into sugar energy. So yeah, the thylakoid is where the light-dependent reactions take place. The last piece of anatomy of a chloroplast is the stroma. And the stroma is basically just everything inside a chloroplast that isn't the thylakoid. The stroma is where our light-independent reactions are taking place. So this is kind of like a preview for the next lecture. So the most important thing about this slide is you should be able to recognize the chloroplast. You should know a thylakoid, and you should know that these little flat things are where the light-dependent reactions are taking place. And you should know that a granum is a stack of these thylakoids. You should know a stroma too, but we're going to be hitting that one more in the next lecture. So let's go ahead and zoom in on one of our thylakoids and see what this thing looks like while it's undergoing the light-dependent reactions. All right, so let's orient ourselves here. Here is our thylakoid membrane. Here is what is referred to as a photosystem. A photosystem is a combination of pigments and protein. And what's going to happen is light is going to come in and hit this photosystem, and it's going to energize an electron. Okay? When it energizes an electron, you don't need to worry about the terminology of reaction center, but when it energizes an electron, that electron is excited. When that electron gets excited, it moves away from its original molecule. So what happens is, in this reaction center here, this electron gets excited, and then what happens, or what has happened to that original molecule? Where there's like a hole, basically, where there is a missing electron. And so what this photosystem is going to do is it's going to come in and it's going to steal an electron from water. This is where oxygen comes from during this process. Because this water is then split into 2 H+ molecules and 1/2 NO2 molecule. And there's some chemistry stuff going on here. But what I'd like you to know specifically is that an electron is excited because some light energy came and hit this photosystem. When that electron was excited, the reaction center where it came from is now missing an electron. And so it goes to find another electron, and the place that it gets that electron from is a water. And so if you email me with the subject line, where does oxygen come from? And you tell me, well, where is it that oxygen actually comes from? And maybe a brief description of sort of why oxygen is generated here, I will give you an extra credit point. So it's more complicated than this. We were just sort of looking at this thing here. This is called photosystem 2. It's where the process starts. Why is it called photosystem 2? It's called that because biology is set up to confuse you. Anyway, this is called photosystem 2. Light is coming in. It is exciting that electron. Water is getting split into oxygen and H+. And then what that electron is going to do is it's going to move through an electron transport chain. Not the same electron transport chain we learned about in respiration. This is a different electron transport chain. But that electron transport chain is going to build up H+ ions on the inside of this thylakoid. Okay, so remember in cellular respiration, we had to break down glucose to get those electrons. Photosystem 2 just takes that electron from water and it uses it to pump in these H+ ions from the electron transport chain. We're going to do something with those in just a second here, but what happens is that electron ultimately winds up in a molecule of NADPH. This is not NADH, this is not FADH2, but NADPH. And this is another electron carrier. Okay, this is another electron carrier. Keep that stored away in the back of your head. We're going to be using this electron carrier shortly. Okay, the final step that happens here in the light-dependent reactions is we're actually generating an ATP with our old friend ATP synthase. This is a very similar transmembrane protein as the one we were looking at in cellular respiration. It's not the same one, but it is a very similar one. And you should remember all this thing does, turns around and generates ATP. Okay, so let's go through that process one more time. Light comes in, hits photosystem 2, excites an electron. That electron is replaced by splitting water. If you didn't have this electron replaced by this water, the process would be done. It would stop right here. That electron is passed through an electron transport chain, which brings in a whole bunch of H+, which are going to run ATP synthase to generate an ATP. That electron ultimately winds up at an electron acceptor here called NADPH. So what comes into the light-dependent reactions? Water, which comes from the soil. Light, which comes from the sun or from your hydroponic grow light or whatever the case may be. Carbon dioxide, which comes from the air. And so that last extra credit question from the last lecture can be answered right here, by the way. What does it output? It outputs high energy molecules that we're going to use in the next lecture or in the light independent reactions to build sugar. Those high energy molecules are NADPH and ATP. So again, why make high energy molecules? Well, we're wanting to fuel the light independent reactions, which are going to happen in the next lecture.